Hey creeps, how's it going? Cameron here. I am back with a Q&A video. So I recently announced a Q&A in a community post, and over 100 of you guys submitted questions, which is crazy. Thank you so much. And I've read through some of the comments, and they're really good questions, like really good. So I'm really excited for this. First off, we have Every Smiley Moon, and they asked, "What's up, Cameron? How's it going? Have you been vaccinated?" It's going well. And yes, I actually have been vaccinated. I've been fully vaccinated for the past, I'd say month and a half, 2 months, which is great. Thank God. I'm so glad to have that done and to feel safe again. So that's awesome. Ancient Roses asks, if you were trapped on an island and you had 5 books with you to read for the rest of your life, which would you want those to be? Of course, I have been asked this one before, and it's always hard because 5 books is not very much, and I like a lot of books. If I had to choose, I would say Harry Potter, just because that's one that I can reread over and over and never get tired of it. Also, my favorite Goosebumps book by R.L. Stine is The Haunted Mask. I can read that book over and over and never get sick of it, so that would be number 2. To Kill a Mockingbird. I know it's cliche, but I love that book. I've loved it ever since I was a kid, and I will continue to love it forever. Paperbacks from Hell by Grady Hendrix. I recently reread that book for the 2nd time, so I've read it a total of 3 times, and I will read it again. In fact, I have been wanting to read it again, even though I just finished it. And the 5th and final book I would bring with me would probably be Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I actually have a bind up of all 3 of those books, so I would take that with me so I could have all 3. My very good friend Stan Brown asks, what is number 1 on your want list as a collector, as in the most desired book you have a realistic chance of getting one day? And what is the holy grail dream, the impossible but fun to think about collectible? So as a collector, I would really love to get a complete set of all of Ruby Jean Jensen's books. I'm actually building a collection of them, and I'm getting pretty close, but I still want the rest of her books that I'm missing. And then the one like dream holy grail book that I want to have, but I know I never will, is number 1 in the Nancy Drew mystery series, The Secret of the Old Clock. I would love to have a 1st edition, 1st printing, in immaculate condition with the dust jacket. That book goes for over 10 grand though, so I know I will never have it, but it's fun to think about. My friend Yerk Bond asks, have you visited other countries, and which ones would you like to visit? I've actually never been out of the US before, I'm sad to say, though I would love to go to Paris, I'd love to go to Italy, I would love to go to Scotland and Ireland. I'd love to tour some castles there, and also London. I'd love to go to London. Let's see, the next question is, did you go to college? And if so, what was your major/minor? So I did go to college. I just got my associate's degree. I only went for 2 years. My major was liberal arts, you know, basic standard liberal arts, which gets the job done. And my minor was in English, but I also actually took a 2-year writing course from the Institute of Children's Literature, which is part of Charter Oak State College in Connecticut. I took that in high school, which actually helped me to graduate high school early. And this was a writing course teaching you about writing for children, what the market is like. I learned a lot from that course. And while I didn't get a degree from it, I got a diploma, and I was able to use those credits toward high school, which was really cool. Is there a Goosebumps or Fear Street book you wanted to be a part of as yourself or as a fictional character? I actually always wanted to be in One Day at Horrorland because it just looks like such a fun park. Yes, I would probably die, but it would be worth it. If you could, would you go back in time? Would you want to relive your childhood, middle school, or high school or college? Yes, I would like to go back in time, and I would go back to my childhood, especially like in the fall time. 90s Halloween is the best Halloween. I don't care what anybody says. So I would go back to like my 90s childhood around Halloween time. No, I would not repeat middle school. Heck no. That was awful. The next question is Fave horror movie. And if I had to choose, I would say the original Halloween, the original Psycho, and Scream. It's between those 3. Here we go. Moonbook says, what do you think of your first video? I have not watched my first video in a long time. I try to stay away from it. I try to stay away from a lot of my earlier videos. But you know what? It is my 10-year anniversary here on BookTube, so let's just go to the beginning. 10 years ago, when I was 18 years old, and let's watch the video together.
Hey YouTube. I've been seeing a lot of videos lately of people showing off their book collections and their DVD.
Oh, I can't do it. Wow, my voice. My voice has changed a lot since 18. I thought my voice would have changed completely by then, but I guess I still had a ways to go. God, I have to do it.
Collections. And I figured I'd do the same thing. This is actually my second YouTube channel. I have another one called Chaney Studios. Me and my sister have a comedy web show called The Nutty News. And we also make several other short films.
Yeah, I had a second channel before I started this one. I had it for about 2 years. It is still open. If you want to go find it, I recommend that you don't, because there's a lot of very cringy content over there, and you have better ways to spend your time. Maybe read some books. People always ask me, how do you read so much, Cameron? I don't waste my time with stupid videos, so don't do it. But yeah, I had a second channel that we took pretty seriously back then. I can't believe I'm actually mentioning it in my very first video. Whatever.
If anyone's interested in checking that out, I'll post a link in the description bar. You can just go there and watch them. I'd really appreciate it if you did.
I would not appreciate it. I would not.
But anyway, this channel is just for showing off
We don't need to watch anymore. That's fine. From the same person, Moon Book, they asked, what is the most beautiful cover you own and the most ugly cover? Wish I had prepared for this one a little bit more before I filmed this. The most beautiful cover. I don't know. I honestly can say I don't know. I have so many favorites that it's hard to say. Especially like these over here, like all of these vintage horror paperbacks, while most people wouldn't categorize them as being beautiful, I do. I think they're beautiful works of art. So you know what? One day I'm going to do a video of like my top 10 favorite vintage horror book covers. I think that should cover it. As for the most ugly cover, I could choose several for that one too, because I love buying books that have awful covers as well. But you know what? One just sprang to my mind, and I'm gonna go grab it really quick. Okay, I grabbed it. So here we have book number 5 in the Forbidden Doors series by Bill Myers. This one's called The Guardian. This is a young adult horror Christian series. It's Christian horror, and that cover is just terrible to me. Here we have like some artwork of a girl, and then a photograph of some guy like photoshopped around her, and it's some really bad 90s Photoshop. It's so bad. And when I saw this, I had to have it, so I bought it. It was only like $1, thank God, but yeah, I kind of love it. It's horrible, but I love it. Next question, do you know K-pop? BTS or Blackpink? I do know of K-pop, but I like sad, depressing music most of the time, and my other kind of music that I listen to is basically just horror soundtracks or synthwave. I don't do pop, so I'm sorry. I don't know the last thing about K-pop. I just know that they exist. How many books do you own? Great question. And I'm actually going to do a video where I count all of my books soon. Doesn't sound very exciting, but I'm gonna try to make it as exciting as possible. I'm averaging like around 10,000, I would say. I'm just kind of estimating that. I guess that's the better word to use. I don't know for sure, but I'm thinking from between like 8 and 10,000, somewhere in there. Okay, so super morbid and weird question incoming, but your channel is Library Macabre. I notice you walk to the cemetery a lot in your vlogs. Do you ever like stop to read to the deceased, or do you just visit/walk past there a lot because of the spooky atmosphere? I have never read to a grave before, but I think it's actually a nice idea. And basically when I go to cemeteries, I like to just walk around because of the atmosphere. I think it's very peaceful in cemeteries, actually. I like the history, and I like just walking around and imagining the people that are buried there, like what their lives were like. I like reading the tombstones, and I especially like getting names from the tombstones for my writing. It's always hard to come up with names for characters, so that's a great way to do it. Just go to a cemetery, look on some tombstones, take some notes. There you go. Hey man, I just wanted to ask you, at what age did you start collecting these books? I've been collecting books forever, literally since I was like 3 years old. I never really wanted toys when I was a kid. I just wanted Goosebumps books, and then I started getting into collecting other kinds of books as I got older. Favorite Are You Afraid of the Dark episode will always be The Tale of the Night Shift. I have a whole bunch of other favorites, but I think that's my #1 favorite. That's the one I watched the most because it scared me. It actually scared me as a kid. One day in the future, a scholar finds out that there are 100 cursed books in the world. Which one of your books would probably be cursed and why? That is a great question. And again, I am looking around my library, trying to decide which one would be cursed. I'm looking. I really don't know. You know what? That's a really good question. And you would think this would be a lot easier to answer than it is since I have so many spooky books. But you know what? I'm gonna just play it safe here and say that the book that I think would be cursed is #5 in the Forbidden Doors series. This is called The Guard. Do you have any plans of turning the Library Macabre into a real physical library someday? No, I could never lend out my books. I've never had much luck doing that, so I'm not gonna start now. Next up is what started your love for horror? And basically my love of horror goes all the way back to Goosebumps. When I was about 3 years old, I started getting into Goosebumps. But I was always kind of a spooky kid. Like even as a toddler, I was a spooky kid. I loved Halloween. For some reason, I was just drawn to it. I don't know why. I really don't know why. What are your top 5 point horror novels and why? I'd say my #1 favorite is The Babysitter by R.L. Stine. That was one of the first young adult books I ever read, and I just couldn't put it down. I loved that book. It's so spooky and eerie, and I just love the idea of some unknown person making phantom whispered phone calls. It's just creepy. I also really loved Trick or Treat by Richie Dickerson because Halloween. The Ripper by D.E. Atkins, which is also called The Cemetery in the UK, was awesome. This basically read like a supernatural slasher book, and it's so trashy and just bonkers, and the characters are just so dislikable and over the top. They're basically, you know, those tropey slasher characters. I just love that book. It was a lot of fun. I also recently read The Boyfriend by R.L. Stine, which was also just trashy and over the top, and I really enjoyed it. Also, The Accident by Diane Ho, which is about this girl who is being haunted by this ghost in her mirror. It's a weird book. I really liked it. What is your favorite Goosebumps book in the original series? The Haunted Mask will forever be The Haunted Mask. That book is classic. What is your favorite horror book series? And I would have to say Goosebumps. Like that's what I grew up on. That's what I still enjoy reading. I have a lot of other favorites, but Goosebumps is like top of the line for me. Next up, we have Slime and Slashers. My friend Kelsey, hey, how's it going? She said, I thought of a way better question. So she must have another question in here somewhere, but I'm just kind of going one after the other. She said, if you could jump into a 90s Nickelodeon show and live in the universe and hang out with the characters, which show would you choose and why? Oh, I would love to be part of the Midnight Society. I always wanted to, as a kid, be a part of the Midnight Society. It was to the point where my friends and I had started our own Midnight Society, and we would basically gather in the sandbox and grab a handful of sand and like throw it on top of a faux fire and be like, submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. We did that all the time. We were dorks. Next up, what was the first ever chapter book you read? Definitely a Goosebumps book, but I can't remember. It was probably The Haunted Mask. I think that was the first one I ever read on my own. Not the first Goosebumps book that I ever read because my mom used to read them to me, but I think that's the first one I read just on my own. What book do you like the most? So my most favorite book ever? I guess To Kill a Mockingbird, but also like Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. God, so many favorites. It depends on the genre, I guess, because I have a lot of books that I like equally, but if I were to categorize them by genre, it'd be a lot easier to choose. I think my most favorite book of all time is probably To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, though. Who's your favorite Arthur? R.L. Stine. He's the king. Sorry, Stephen King, but R.L. Stine is the king. And what's your favorite TV show of all time? Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's not on the air anymore, obviously, but I love that show. I just finished rewatching it for the 10th time. It's fantastic. When are you going to read Darren Chans De Monda series? I have been wanting to read that for a while. I have read the first few books in the Cirque du Freak series, and then I never finished, even though I was enjoying it. But I was a kid at the time. I didn't see it through to the end, so I would love to go back and read that whole series and then go to his De Monda series and read that. I will eventually. I'm just so booked up. Pun completely intended. Monster Blood asks, what is your favorite or a couple of your favorite Give Yourself Goosebumps books? I really love Checkout Time at Dead End Hotel. I think that's what it's called. Also, One Night in Pain House, which is about this this haunted house where this horror movie franchise was shot, and it's actually a real haunted house and the kids dare each other to go in. Favorite and least favorite Series 2000 book. I actually really liked Cry of the Cat. That was a fun book. My least favorite would be the one that I just read, which was called Scream School. Love the cover, hated the book. Have you ever tried manga, light novels, basically Japanese short novels or Japanese horror? Yes, I have. I've read a few manga and I've started some series. Like I started Bleach, I started Black Butler. It's just such a commitment, and I can never see it through to the end. That, or I'll get like 10 issues in and then I forget what happens and I have to go back and start over again. It's just too much work. In terms of Japanese horror, I have read Uzumaki by Junji Ito and loved it. I didn't like the last half of the book where it gets all apocalyptic, but I love the first half. I thought it was brilliant. If you had no budgetary or time constraints, where would be your dream location to film a video, and what would the topic be? I would love to not just go to one place, but to hit up a ton of bookstores all around the US. This would be a lot of fun. I would hit up some of the biggest bookstores, like the Last Bookstore, some of the most well-known ones, the Strand, and then I'd also hit up a bunch of the like smaller used bookshops in between. I would hunt for vintage horror books and just vintage books in general. And I think it would be awesome because no budgetary or time constraints. I could buy all of the books that I wanted, and then I could have plenty of time to just tour and go to all of these bookstores. That would be freaking awesome. And I don't know, maybe someday I can do something sort of like that. I doubt I could just like tour the entire US, but it would be fun to like just choose some and hit them up along the way. Probably make that happen someday, but it would have to be a road trip. I would like to go out a ways. What author inspired you to start writing, and what was the inspiration behind Autumn Crow? R.L. Stine is the author that inspired me to start writing. That's the first author I ever like consciously knew was an author and wrote those books. Like before that, like Dr. Seuss in my mind wasn't really a real person. He was like a character, and these books just sprung out of nowhere. It wasn't until I started like getting into Goosebumps that I realized that R.L. Stine was an actual person who wrote these books, and that's what made me want to be an author. The inspiration behind Autumn Crow was that I love Ray Bradbury, and I love the autumnal Halloween atmosphere that he paints, and I wanted to do something like that. I wanted to make my own town where it's like Halloween all the time. I wanted to make a town that felt like home to me, like a place that I would want to live. And then of course I put my own little dark twist on it, and that's pretty much the inspiration. I just wanted to write about a place that I wanted to live at because that would make me want to write about it. Alicia Brooks says, what's your favorite episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer? Hush. Hush is so good. That episode is a masterpiece. It freaked me out when I was a kid, but I couldn't stop watching it. So good. Did you read the Attack on Titan manga? If yes, what are your thoughts about the ending? I have not read it, though I would like to because I hear it's good. Also, it has an ending, which is awesome. Most manga don't have endings, so I would love to check out that series sometime. Lizard King asks quite a few questions. He said, if you could be one mythological creature, what would it be and why? Probably a werewolf, honestly. Sometimes I think maybe I am a werewolf. What is your favorite flavor of tea? I always drink green tea. It doesn't matter if it's lemon flavored or like I have a green tea now, which is peach and apricot flavored, which is really good. I just like green tea because of the health benefits mostly. Do you believe in aliens? Yes, I do. I absolutely do. How many books is too many books? I think too many books is when you start buying so much that it affects your finances and you basically become a hoarder to where there's just piles and piles and piles of books all around your house, to the point where you don't even know what you have, and you just have books for the sake of having books, and you're buying books that you're not even really that interested in. A lot of people have said in the comments before, point blank, Cameron, you have a problem, get help. And I don't agree with that, because for one, you don't know what my finances are like. I'm doing fine, by the way. I only buy books that I want to read. I only buy books that interest me, and I'm very organized. Like, my books are all very organized. They're on shelves. I have a couple of little piles sitting here or there, and those are just books to put away. And when I do start running out of room, I get rid of old books that I'm not interested in anymore. I'm not a hoarder. I don't have to keep everything. Like, when I started getting more into vintage horror, I had to make room. So I started getting rid of the books that I bought back when I was like a teenager that I'm not really interested in anymore. Like, I tried the whole YA fantasy dystopian thing. It wasn't my thing. So I wound up getting rid of a bunch of those to make room for these. Besides R.L. Stine, who is your favorite author of point horror? I really love Caroline B. Cooney, who wrote The Face on the Milk Carton. The Face on the Milk Carton actually is not a point horror book, but that's one of my favorite books ever. It's so good. But I think her point horror books are a little more interesting, a little more different. She elevates the stories just a little bit. They're very solid books. Other than horror, what genre are you most interested in writing? Mystery. I would love to write a detective mystery series someday, kind of in style of Nancy Drew, but a lot darker, a little bit more like a slasher series, since most slashers do tend to have a mystery kind of twist, like who is the killer. I would love to do like a Nancy Drew, but with a slasher killer. Which season of Charmed is the best? Season 1. All the way. Happy 10th channel birthday. Thank you so much. What's one dream video you'd like to make, or bookish reading or writing goal that you'd like to achieve in the next 10 years of the Library Macabre? I guess the book shopping video I was talking about, that vlog, that would be really fun to do. Just like a book shopping road trip. And then in terms of writing, I'd love to keep going with Autumn Crow. I have so many ideas, guys. So many. I want to make Autumn Crow High a big long series. I also have some ideas for an Autumn Crow middle grade series. When it comes to reading, I want to read all of the Fear Street books. That's my current goal. I want to read like all 150, including all of the original books, the super chillers, the trilogies, the spin-offs. I want to read them all. Do you enjoy any non-horror literature, or are you purely a horror lover? Yeah, I love other books. I read other kinds of books. For the past few years, it's been mostly strictly horror, but I do talk about some other kinds of books on my channel. I love mysteries, and I also love fantasy. I've not read a whole lot of fantasy in the past several years, but I would eventually like to dip my toes back into it again. Have you ever read any non-horror books that nonetheless managed to scare you or rattle you? And actually, yeah, I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid is not technically a horror novel. It's actually categorized as a thriller, psychological thriller, but that book really scared me. It really, really messed me up. So I would say that is the one. My friend D. Christopher Tatum asked, if you could write a licensed novel for any horror franchise, which one would it be? Which is a great question. And I would say Halloween, because I've seen all of the movies dozens of times. I love the movies. I love Michael Myers as a character. I love Laurie Strode. I know the mythos inside and out. I've read some of the novelizations. I feel like I'm pretty knowledgeable about the series overall, so I would say I could probably pull it off. And honestly, if I was offered the job to write a Halloween book, you don't say no to that. Congrats on 10 years. Thank you. Do you ever unhaul books? Yes, I think I just talked about that a couple minutes ago, that I do unhaul books to make room for new books and ones that I'm just like not in the mood for anymore. Do you collect James Bond books? Have you heard of them? And yes, I have absolutely heard of James Bond, and I do know that they're books. I just have not collected any, and I've not read any. I've seen, of course, many of the movies, as everybody has, but I've not read any of the books, and I would like to eventually. It's not really my genre. I like spy stories, but I just don't usually seek them out, but it would be cool to read at least a couple of them. Which other collection of books would you like to start collecting? I would like to start collecting more of the Easton Press books. I only have a few of those. They're just pretty expensive, so I've kind of been putting it off for a few years, but I would like to collect more of those. Also, Folio Society. I've actually not bought any books from Folio Society. I think I have one that I found at a used bookstore for $1, and it's on like medieval times. It's nothing that I'm like super interested in, but I would love to start collecting some of their like horror fiction books. Like they have a really cool edition of Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury, which is another favorite book of mine. What is your favorite Stephen King book and why? And my favorite one at the moment is Pet Sematary. I've actually not read a ton of King. Surprisingly, I've read between like 10 and 15 of his books, somewhere in there. I can't remember exactly, but Pet Sematary is my favorite one that I've read so far. I love that book. I think it is the most tightly paced book that he's written, and it's not too long. It's just long enough, which you can't often say about Stephen King. And the last question I'm going to answer for now, and then I'll be back for part 2. What is your process in writing a book? And this is something that really changes constantly, but right now my current process for writing is writing an outline. I used to be a pantser, but right now I find that writing an outline is the best thing to do. I take all of my current thoughts and I just write them chapter by chapter. I just get them on the page. I don't do like bullet points or Roman numerals or anything like that to write an outline like I did in college. I just go chapter by chapter and I'm like, this happens and then this happens and then this happens. And if I have any dialogue in mind that I want to use, I write that into the chapter. Or if I have a specific scene that I want to go ahead and write, I'll write that really quick. I think it really helps because it's all there. It's on paper. It's out of my head. I can change it. It doesn't have to stay like etched in concrete. I can actually change it if I decide to as I'm writing, but at least I know a general idea of where the story's going, and it just helps a lot. So there you go. That is part 1 of my Q&A video. I will be back very soon for part 2 where I will answer the rest of the questions. Thank you all so much for all of the awesome questions that you guys asked. You put a lot of thought into these questions and I appreciate it because it made it a lot more fun for me. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to give me a like down below and leave me a comment. And if you don't have anything to say, just say, hey creep, that works too. Thank you again for watching and I will catch you on the next episode of Library Macabre. Later, creeps.